Hey everybody, welcome to Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football live video show. As always, it's Carter, Ben, and Mitch here to talk all things Alabama football with you. So, playoffs.
Needs no introduction.
Yeah. Heading into, obviously, the rubber match, although it's in the semis and not the finals with Clemson. And we're really excited for this matchup. We're really excited. We're finally closing in on the game, and really excited to talk about it with y'all. So I think we're going to start with sort of the more the matchup I feel like that everybody's been talking about a little more, that where perhaps it's a bit more of an interesting thing to talk about, is when Alabama has the ball on offense. And the ways in which, because I feel like the most of the discussion from Alabama fans this game, going into this game, has been what is Alabama going to do on offense. So I think we'll start with Alabama when they have the ball. And it's going to be tough, I think, is the first thing to say. Clemson's defense is obviously really, really good, in particular the defensive line. I mean, they have at least 2 and maybe 3 guys who are going to be first rounders next year in Farrell and Bryant and Wilkins, and then a guy in Dexter Lawrence who might be better than those other 3, but isn't draftable yet. I mean, they're monsters. This is the 2016 Alabama level defensive line. They're incredible.
They're really good. So I want to just quickly start before we sort of get into that part. Let's just want to talk about quickly what's not going to happen. What's not going to happen is that there's not going to be a quarterback change. And I only bring this up because obviously this has been a topic of conversation. I did right after I think the night that Alabama made the playoff, I think I did a Twitter poll about who people think should start the game at quarterback for Alabama. And I think 21% of respondents said that it should be Tua, which is, I guess, what I expected probably. There is like it's the minority of the fan base, but it's a very vocal minority that kind of Tua should be handed the reins. Tua is not going to be handed the reins, nor should Tua be handed the reins. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just sort of wanted to bring this up. One thing we do know is that Saban. So first of all, Tua should not start the game. Second of all, if Jalen struggles for the first 2 series, Tua should not suddenly come in the game. You just cannot play Tua for very obvious reasons, and those reasons being that he has not started all year. He hasn't played much all year.
He is a true freshman who has heretofore only played in garbage time and missed playoffs against Clemson.
Right. Regardless of what you think about Jalen, and I don't think we're really going to litigate that issue on this episode, but regardless of where you stand on him, the answer to your concerns is not to throw in the quarterback that has barely played this year and to see live action for the first time against this Clemson defense. It wouldn't shock me if there was I don't know about a package for Tua, but like a play or 2 where Tua's on the field. Saban loves his little gadget plays in big games. We've seen this before. They're not usually that gadgety, but he does like to pull some stuff out sometimes in big games. And would it shock you guys if Tua got it was involved in a play at some point?
I mean, yes, but I was also surprised when he, did an onside kick against Clemson in the national championship game.
Right.
In the third quarter. So I could see it happening. I don't expect and we've talked about this before. The issue is that with the idea that your backup is sort of the better passer. I mean, how do you fashion a package for the guy who is his strength is that he's the passer?
Right.
The successful quarterback systems we've seen in the past, obviously the 2 quarterback systems we've seen, obviously the major example is Chris Leak and Tim Tebow at Florida. But you can also think about
Terrell Pryor and whoever the starter was then.
Yeah, or to a game that ended up not nearly meaning as much as we all thought it would. But think back at the beginning of last year when Texas played Notre Dame, and Texas swapped Buechele and I'm totally blanking on the other guy's name.
Yeah, me too. But I know who you're talking about.
To be the runner that essentially won the game for them on some of the last couple of plays. They essentially used him like a wildcat type guy. that's not really the dynamic here, and so it's, and again we've talked about this before, but it's sort of hard to see how you would do that.
Right.
So I think if he comes in, if that happens, it would be for essentially a sort of like trick play, right? Like you put them both out there, and then Tua takes the snap and pitches to Jalen, who like throws down the field to Calvin or something. It would be something like that.
Exactly.
Or
right.
Like,
we did.
Go ahead, Mitch. I'm sorry.
I was just kidding, where he like comes in at quarterback, they're in the huddle, and then all of a sudden they run a wildcat, and he's just split out wide doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Just to sort of draw attention or something. Right. Yeah. Right. So my thought is that there won't be a package for Tua because you're not going to throw him out there on the field for 5 or 6 or 7 consecutive plays. But but maybe there's like one play, right? One just random play sprinkled in somewhere when they're around midfield and something's going on. So I don't know. But I guess I just wanted to quickly address this because people are talking about it. That's the only way that we're going to see Tua in this game, and it's the only way we should see Tua in this game. What's going to happen next year in spring ball, I have no clue. But for right now, Jalen is the starter, for better or worse, and we'll see what happens.
Yep. So moving on to how Alabama will actually attack Clemson with their actual quarterback. Well, I guess you frame, and the rest of the Clemson defense is not like they have great talent. Like
Trey Lamar's really good at inside linebacker. He's fast, man. He's really fast sideline to sideline. But like, I don't know, the corners don't strike me as fantastic players. I don't know what their like NFL prospects are, but just like watching the games, like they don't really jump out at you. It's not like a Mackenzie Alexander or a Tankersley or something. Like I don't think they quite have that kind of talent at corner this year.
Yeah, no, neither do I. And like if you're going off the 2016 Alabama comparison, they're that good on the front. They don't have a Reuben Foster. They don't have they don't have those kind of guys in the back seven. So
and they have an old white middle linebacker who's probably not even as good as Boulware was last year.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, the defensive line though, like Carter kind of went over this. I mean, man, they are good. They are really good. And like they complement each other well too, right? Like Lawrence is kind of the space eater inside, a really like powerful player, tough to double team. Wilkins then is like more of the 3-tech, quicker defensive end. I mean, defensive tackle, and then your defensive ends are great. Farrell is a great player. Yeah. He is so fast and just so agile, and it's like he's everywhere on the field. He's just so impressive to me. Like they're really good. Like I don't know if Alabama's ever had a group of 4 guys that good at the same time along the defensive line.
You sort of have to bring in outside linebackers.
Exactly. You'd have to look at like a Tim Williams and a Ryan Anderson, and then pair them with like John Allen and Dalvin Tomlinson or something. But but these guys are good. So I guess let's kind of break this down. Let's start with standard downs. Standard downs are probably more critical than passing downs for Alabama because if they get into passing downs, the drives probably aren't going anywhere anyway. So how are they going to move the ball on standard downs against Clemson, I think is really the key issue here.
Yeah. So, and obviously you have discussed this some, and we discuss it more. My thought, the more and more I've been thinking about this game, is that it's actually a game where a Lane Kiffin type game plan, if you will, would be a solid one, in that you want to be fast and aggressive, and you want to stress the edges and spread the field horizontally and get the ball away from those guys who are clogging things up in the middle and raking after your quarterback. So screens, wide runs, option plays, like anything you can do to neutralize those guys at the point of attack, other than just saying we're going to man up and run right at you, which there's reason. So, like, for instance, we've talked all year about how Alabama, in contrast to years past on offense, they do really well they have a very low stuff rate, which means that the backs rarely get tackled at or behind the line of scrimmage. And Clemson's defensive line, for as good as they are from a defense perspective, so Alabama's, let's see, they are 5th in the country in stuff rate on offense, which is good, like fifth lowest stuff rate on offense in the country, whereas Clemson on defense is 39th. So I think there's a good reason to expect that when Alabama uses its traditional run game on standard downs, they're not going to get blown up the way, for instance, Clemson did in 2015 when they would run the ball with Derrick Henry. It seemed like every other play he was getting tackled for a 3-yard loss. So I think what I would like to see is a game plan that really stresses the edges and forces Clemson to spread out. And then when you've got kind of a depopulated box a little bit, and this is more in terms of the run game, obviously, but obviously the short passing and the screens factor into this. But once you've thinned things out in the middle a little bit, then you can move toward a more traditional run game and maybe kind of take advantage of that. Those things that would have been a 2-yard gain before. Now that you've got them a little more spread out, now they're 4- and 5-yard, maybe 6-7-yard gains.
So you're thinking sort of maybe like the opposite of the game plan against Auburn, because against Auburn, on the first drive of the Auburn game, they stressed the perimeter, but afterwards they really ran between the tackles a lot, and they especially ran the quarterback between the tackles a lot in the first half against Auburn. And then they come out in the second half and they hit Auburn with some perimeter runs. They scored a touchdown. They probably would have done more of that had they been able to sustain drives after that first drive of the second half. But you're thinking more for this game. Let's stress the perimeter early and often and see how Clemson defends that. Hopefully they don't defend it too well. Hopefully they need to allocate more bodies to the perimeter, and then you can kind of hit them through the middle more.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Mitch, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, same thing. My question would be, who's getting the most carries at the beginning? I would think if you're going with that kind of game plan, Bo, maybe. I know he started last year.
Yeah. See, I think that one of the reasons why going with a perimeter, there's a lot of reasons, and we'll get to these, but one of the reasons why going with a perimeter-oriented game plan, especially by way of the run, is a good idea is because all 3 of their running backs are very well suited to run perimeter plays, right? Whereas Bo and Josh Jacobs are kind of less suited to run interior run plays, right? Like Damien's kind of good all over. He's just pretty solid in every area, but especially Bo and Jacobs are better on perimeter runs. So I'm not sure. People are really campaigning for Damien to get more carries, and that's kind of been a big story, right? Like, it's been so much of a big story that Damien, I think, has even been asked about it in press conferences, and Brian Daboll might have been asked about it today. I'm not sure, but I think Saban has been asked about it. So like, this has been like a big story that's even reaching inside the program. Do we think that kind of like, they're not going to be influenced by outside voices as far as what they do in the game. But there might be something to the fact that Damien should get a few more carries here. He's at, what is he averaging per carry this year? It's something crazy, right?
Yeah.
Is it like 9.7? Because that sounds way too high. But
8 or 9.
I feel like I saw the number 9.7 tossed around at some point, and I was like, that can't be. But that's really high.
110 carries for 906 yards, which is pretty damn good.
That sounds like, that's okay. 110 carries for, okay, so it's under 9. It's just under 9, if my math is correct.
Yeah. 8.2.
This is not my strong suit, but okay, so 9.7 is crazy. But 8.2 is also pretty crazy.
Yeah. I think I think the Damian needs more carries is when I see that, it seems to be just sort of another way of Alabama fans' proclivity toward run the damn ball expressing itself.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm somewhat dismissive of it in that sense, but in the sense that Damian is quite clearly their most complete back. Then if you're saying he should receive a higher share of the carries, I'm not like, because I think that can be dismissive of maybe the way in which the workload has contributed to its success. Because I think it seems pretty clear that Damian is not one of those guys like, perhaps Mark Ingram, who kind of tends to get better as the game goes on and kind of needs some carries to get going. Damian's not that guy. He's been effective all year with the carries that has been given.
Right.
So, I think there's something to be said for the idea that maybe the workload is helping him be as productive as he is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm honestly kind of ambivalent about the whole thing. If they wanted to give Damian more carries, I would not say no, because like I said, he's obviously the most complete back on the roster, but that is not my like principal area of concern for the offense.
Yeah. Mitch, you're thinking about giving Bo some early opportunities.
Yeah, and just like what we saw last year at the beginning of the game. I guess to go back real quick on Damian, like I would wonder, like thinking back to plays where Bo and Jacobs aren't getting the yards that maybe we needed. Like I don't remember seeing plays and being like, wow, if Damian had been out there, he might have like broken that or something. Like,
yeah,
I would wonder like what people think Bo and Josh Jacobs aren't doing that Damian would have done specifically.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I mean, Bo isn't as elusive as Damian, right? Like he's
yeah.
I mean, I think there are plays you can point to on like inside zone and stuff where you say, there was a cutback lane that Damian probably would have seen that Bo didn't. But also, I think they've been good enough at using the backs in the roles they're more comfortable. Like I don't have numbers on this. I haven't gone back and charted all the plays or something, but I would be very surprised if Damian weren't getting a considerably higher percentage of his carries inside the tackles than Bo and Jacobs are. So they're already using them in a way that kind of caters to their strengths.
Right.
So like, yeah, you can say there's a play here, a play there where Damian would have seen a hole that Bo wouldn't, but I think Mitch's point is a good one in that it's not as though he needs to get more carries because the others have been ineffective.
Yeah. Hold on. That is hopefully better. So bad echo. Can anybody else hear that or no?
I'm not getting it.
I can hear it.
Oh, try taking your headphones out. I think that's worked before.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you hear me too? Do I echo too?
You sound good.
Sounds fine for me.
But I'm getting an echo still. So why don't you guys? Okay. No, I'm bad. You guys keep talking. I'll try to fix this.
Yeah, so I guess the big problem I have with the whole give Damian more carries thing is essentially what we're sort of hinting at here is who are you taking carries away from? And you can say, well, maybe take carries away from Jalen, but like one, Jalen's a really good runner, and two, a big chunk of it's not like they're doing a whole ton of designed runs for Jalen that he's like not being effective on or something like that. A ton of his carries are scrambles or they're options where, I mean, that's the whole point of an option is that you don't decide before the play is run who's getting the ball. So you can't say like give Damian the ball more on option plays because it doesn't work that way. So yeah, I just don't know unless all you're just saying is run the ball more, which as those who are familiar with the show will know, that tends to be an incredibly simplistic analysis that is rarely informed by the kind of deeper analysis that we're looking to have here. So I'm not just going to sit here and say, run the ball more and get Damian more carries. So,
yeah, I think that's fair. So, but on the subject of how you use the backs, I would like to see a lot of, and I think we will see a lot of 2-back sets this game. I'd like to pair Jacobs out there with some of the other backs. A lot of counters, I think, would be a really good strategy in this game. Because if we're going to run to the perimeter, you want to, you're running to the perimeter to kind of negate the impact of the interior defensive linemen. Yep. And if you use, hopefully, counters and stuff, you can move the linebackers and control and mess with their eye discipline. So I think that is something that they're really going to break out this game in a way that they haven't really broken it out so far this season. I think that's one of those things that maybe they've kind of sprinkled in, but they've been sort of keeping on reserve for a game like this where it could be very impactful. I think it's very important when we talk about the run game to key in on the matchup inside, because first of all, just from a talent standpoint, that's a huge mismatch, right?
Yeah.
Like Lawrence and Wilkins going against the interior of the Alabama offensive line, Pierce Baker, Bozeman, and why am I forgetting the right tackle, Lester Cotton. Lester Cotton. That's like a big mismatch. And I think in the Florida State game, it really showed, right? Like those guys got dominated in the Florida State game.
Yep.
But then against Auburn, who is similarly good, Auburn is the only team that Alabama's played this year that kind of is up to the level that Clemson's at, right? Like maybe not quite there, but they're up to that level. I think they're S&P plus against the run, and their rushing success rate are pretty similar.
Yeah, I could check that. Clemson's defensive S&P plus against the run was 9, and Auburn is 5th.
Yeah, so that's really very similar. Auburn even a little bit better. So in the Florida State game, they really struggled, right? But they were a lot better in the Auburn game. The backs in the Auburn game, I think, averaged over 5 yards a carry.
Yeah.
So they played really well, and it was mostly on perimeter run. So I think that is going to be like a huge component of this game plan, at least, like you said, at least early on. And I think one of the particular ways in which they're going to try to use the perimeter run game, and this is something that they haven't shown to Clemson the last 2 years because it wasn't part of what they did. And it's also something that, from what I've seen, Clemson hasn't seen a lot of this year, is I think you're going to see a lot of midline reads in this game. I think that they did this a lot against Auburn, and I think that they are very frequently going to leave one of those defensive tackles unblocked. Now, they're going to do this for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I want to say that in terms of option plays where they don't block the end man on the line of scrimmage, I don't know how much of that you want to do in this game. And the reason is because I don't think you want to option Farrell. He is so good when he is unblocked. He was a problem last year when he was unblocked. I've seen him be a problem all year this year when he's unblocked, because he's just so fast and athletic that he's not going to he's not going to run out of the play, and he's also not just going to stand there and let you do whatever you want. He's had so many times this year where I've seen him just attack the mesh point and blow up the play, and that's an issue that Alabama's had when leaving unblocked ends.
Think about Arden Key doing that in the LSU game.
Yeah, Myles Garrett last year. leaving him unblocked. So I think, and Austin Bryan is not quite as good as Farrell, but he's kind of, also very good. So I think you want to put bodies on those guys. And also the midline read plays, unlike the plays where you option an end man on the line, are always going to be perimeter runs, right? It's always going to be a quarterback keep up the middle packaged with a perimeter run for the back.
Right.
So I think that if you leave Lawrence or Wilkins unblocked, it'll allow you, first of all, to not have to block both of them. That's a big thing.
Yep.
It'll allow you to get better blocking angles against the other tackle, to not let him knife through and blow up the play, because you're going to be able to create angles where more sort of side-to-side horizontal angles where you can hopefully seal him off to the backside better than you would be able to if you were forced to block both of them. They're not going to be able to attack the mesh point, because the thing is that if you do a midline read and you leave that guy unblocked and he attacks the mesh point, then you just hand the ball off to the back and he runs away from him. It's just a very easy, quick decision by the quarterback. So I think that that's something that we're going to see, and I think we're going to see a lot of it, because it's one of Alabama's best perimeter run plays. It fits well in terms of the strength of the Clemson defense and their interior defensive linemen, and it's something that isn't on tape from the previous Alabama-Clemson games, and it's something that Clemson hasn't seen a lot of this year. So I think we're going to see that early and often, and I really believe that it's going to be effective. I think that is going to force them to really get out of their plan and put extra bodies on the perimeter, and that'll open up other stuff.
Yeah, and the point about that Clemson hasn't seen a lot of it this year, or hasn't seen it from Alabama in previous years, kind of dovetails with the point about midline in general, and part of what makes it such an effective play at times is that at this point in college football, zone read especially, but other is sort of in-man based spread option plays. It's old hat in college football at this point. Like, it's still tough to defend especially when you have great players running it. I mean, that's the whole idea of an option play to begin with. But defensive ends and the players who get optioned on those plays, especially when they're teams that have played a lot of spread teams, they're used to it.
Right.
Like and teams are used to defending it. So they may not do it perfectly every time, but they know what to do. They know what their plan. Like, for instance, Alabama, for years and years, the plan on zone read was always force the give and trust the interior of your defense to stop the back going up the middle, which has been very effective for them in the past. But when you run a midline, you've got a guy like a defensive tackle who is not used to being optioned. Yeah. And so the main thing for a defender, no matter how schematically a defense chooses to defend zone read or another play like that, or any option play, the main thing for a defender is to be decisive. Know what you're supposed to do and do it right away. Force the decision, attack the mesh point, whatever, and don't give the quarterback time to think or to fake you out. When you're not used to defending it, it's harder and harder to have that decisiveness. And so the advantage in using a play, there's a great advantage in optioning a guy who's not used to being optioned.
Yeah. And Clemson also, one thing that Alabama had a lot of issues with last year, and other teams had issues against Clemson, is that the Clemson defensive linemen are so quick to react on stretch plays. They read the first step from the offensive linemen so well, and they get out there and they out leverage them. Well, if who's ever being options if he wants to sort of chase the play and chase the perimeter run, then Jalen's just going to keep it. He's going to punish you up the middle. So I think that is one solution. I don't think that, like, I don't think it's like a magic bullet or anything. Like, I don't think that Alabama is going to spring off big play after big play after big play, but they don't really need to, right? They need to stay ahead of the chains. They need to control the football. Alabama needs to possess the ball for a solid period of time in this game. It's a big thing that they need to change from previous games, even previous games where they ended up winning really as the result of lots of big plays. So there needs to be an emphasis on just staying ahead of the chains on the ground, because they got to stay on the field.
Yeah.
No more 90 plays. Not even no more 85 plays. They got to keep Clemson under 80 plays.
Yeah.
That's like the first and foremost the goal, and the biggest part of that goal really, or I should say the biggest key to achieving that goal is to keep the ball on offense.
Yeah. Right, there's your if you're looking for an excuse to say run the damn ball, there's your area. That's your justification. Say you want to shorten the game. You don't want Clemson to run as many plays. You trust Alabama to be efficient and stay ahead of the chains when they run the ball. If that's your excuse for saying run the damn ball, then say that. That's a fine analysis. I will happily accept that.
Right. And I also think, and I guess this is sort of another thing to talk about, is that if we want to have more of sort of a ball control type of offensive approach in this game, I think the other way to move the ball on standard downs is to sort of couple with your perimeter runs is a lot of short passes. These are things that Alabama could have done last year that they tried to do at times with varying degrees of success. Jalen at times was inaccurate. But I think that this year, I watched the NC State game. I don't know if you guys were able to watch that game.
Yep.
But they just ran RPO after RPO after RPO, and they just hit short pass after short pass after short pass on standard downs. And I think that's going to be there for Alabama against Clemson.
Right. I mean, and even just give me the RPOs that Lane loved to run with Coker in 2015. Give me the most basic one there is. Give me inside zone packaged with a bubble screen.
Yeah. And I think that for this matchup in particular, I listened to, or I didn't listen, but I was reading quotes from Clemson players, and a lot of their talking about Jalen, and they talked a lot about his improvement with the deep ball and being able to beat them down the field. And then I think about the fact that they have given up last 2 years big plays in the passing game, right? Like, big long touchdowns. And I think about the fact that this year they have given up some big plays in the passing game too. And I think that they're going to be very wary of getting beat over the top. They think that Clemson, if I'm Clemson, I think I've got a great defense. Their offense has some vulnerabilities. The last thing I want to do is let them hit big plays and not drive down the field on us. So because of that, I think they're going to be forced to concede some stuff underneath. And also because I don't think that they have the talent at corner and at safety in order to contest passes to all areas of the field. So I think they're going to have to concede something. And I think what they're going to concede is that area, up to about 5, 6, 7 yards past the line of scrimmage. And Alabama needs to be able to consistently take advantage of that. Just simple RPOs. You could even put in RPOs where Jalen keeps, so he doesn't even have to worry about handing the ball off. And it's also super important, and I talked about this a little on Twitter, but they need to have built-in reads for Jalen where, based on the defensive alignment, he can check in and check out of stuff. Like, that needs to be there for them, because sometimes the defense is going to line up in a way in which these plays cannot possibly work, and other times they're going to line up in ways in which these plays probably will work. So they need to be able to get in and out of these plays seamlessly, so they don't kind of have these, because like last year they had these plays where they ran where the play was over before it started.
Yep.
And a lot of that is maybe because of the issues with the offensive coaching staff and true freshman quarterback and so on and so forth. But the problem is that basically they just ran too many plays that had no chance of success from the very beginning. That has to change this year. The plays that they run have to have a chance of working. I mean, this sounds obvious, but it's a really big deal, because it was just last year there was just too many of those plays that just were going nowhere from the beginning. So hopefully we see a little bit of a difference in that this year.
Yeah.
And then I would also say that I think they're going to move Calvin around a lot. They did that some in the Auburn game. They got to him some real quick passes, like inside 10 yards out of the slot. I I rewatched that Auburn game a number of times, and especially the part with Alabama on offense. I thought they had a really good plan. I thought that they had a lot of nice concepts in there. I thought they had a lot of things that were working for them. I just think that, like, we talked about how guys just didn't make individual plays. They just didn't get enough first downs. They didn't get enough of a chance to really fully establish that game plan. But I think there was a lot of things that worked there. And I think that if they can just make those individual plays in this game, I think that you can see more of the same success in terms of both those perimeter runs and a lot of those short passes that they should be able to hit on.
Agreed. Anything else on offense?
Well, do we want to talk a little bit about passing downs?
Do we?
Probably not really.
I'd sort of rather not, honestly.
So passing downs aren't going to go too well, I don't think.
No. I think what you probably want to end up doing is like, I don't know. Generally play it conservative, I would say. Give me some draws. Give me some boots, maybe something that'll roll you away from the pressure. See if you can get screens with a wall of blockers out front and let a guy make a play.
Clemson zone blitzes so much.
Yeah.
On those plays, and they do it so well. Like, they so often have free rushers. And, like, they don't even need to, because their front four is just so good anyway that those guys will probably get to the quarterback. So it's almost like gratuitous with the fact that they do these kind of cool and creative zone blitzes and always have free rushers. But, like, I don't think that those plays are going to go so well for Alabama. I think I tweeted something a while ago basically that, like, there should hardly be any focus in the offensive planning room about succeeding on, like, 3rd and 7s or more. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I don't see it at all. So, Carter, you were saying conservative. If you didn't want to play conservative, I don't really know how you would attack them, if only to maybe go for big plays on 3rd downs, maybe kind of try to, like, hit them for all or nothing plays in those situations, especially because they're usually bringing extra bodies.
Yeah, I mean, like, do like I don't know, try a fade down the sideline to Calvin or something that's going to get the ball out quick, and you trust a guy to go up and make a play over the corner, something like that.
Yeah, they got to stay out of those situations. Let me ask you guys this though. Do you guys think that they're going to be successful moving the ball on standard downs? Because I don't think anybody does. I don't think anybody I think that people are expecting, like, the narrative around Jalen is not good. The narrative around the Clemson defensive line obviously is amazing. I think that people are coming into this matchup thinking that Clemson is really going to take it to them in terms of, like, all areas of their defense against Alabama offense, including standard downs. I mean, do you think that Alabama's going to have success?
Mitch?
I mean, more so than I think we saw against Auburn. I mean, I
but
can't.
They had a fair amount of success against Auburn, right?
Yeah.
So you think that they could even do more of that here?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think even if your game plan was to kind of take the air out of the ball and just sort of run straight at him, I don't think that's a sustainable game plan, like, over the course of the game. But even if you wanted to come out and do that right at the beginning, I think they'd be better at it than a lot of people think they will.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's important so much in this game to try to, like, set that up for later on. I think that you want to come out and you want to try to establish what you do best as early and as often as possible here, because it's important to score. It's really important. I mean, it's always important to score early, but I have faith that these plays are going to work against Clemson, and I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that right away. I would like to them Clemson defense is going to come into this game so confident. I mean, we know that. And I'd like for Alabama to come out and try to hurt them immediately, because I think that will be really beneficial to them in terms of forcing them out of their comfort zone, and then you can maybe have success on other things later in the game. So somebody asked us, they said, who, like when we were talking about who you take the runs away from, somebody was saying they think we should take the runs away from Jalen. What do you guys think that, because like, you know, if more carries are going to go to like Damian or other backs, like who loses carries then? So what do you guys see Jalen's factor being in the run game? We already talked about him in the option game, but what about the design keeps?
You know, the thing is that the keeper game has not been a huge part of the game plan all year, I don't think.
It was bigger against Auburn though, right? Like there was a lot of design keeps against Auburn. Do we want to see that? How much of that do we want to see? I mean, I think that stuff could be there later in the game.
Yeah.
I think that stuff, if you can have success hitting perimeter runs early in the game, I think that could set up some possibilities for getting QB keep plays going like in the second half of the game. I will say that the one area where I really do want to see QB keep plays as a big part of the plan is on short yardage situations.
Oh yeah.
Like that, just they, again, like Carter, you mentioned the stats before, they're not great in terms of getting stuffed, just like Auburn wasn't great in terms of getting stuffed, and Alabama, because of their QB run game, very rarely gets stuffed. So I think we want to see lots of keeps for Jalen in short yard situations, and this probably goes without saying, but I want them to go for every single 4th and short.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. If you're 4th and short in plus territory, go for it.
And even around midfield, like even if they're in minus territory, like near midfield, like at their own 40 or something, go for it. Yeah. Go for it. Keep the ball. You cannot give the ball back to this offense. Not because this offense, and we'll get to that in a minute, not because of that the Clemson offense is super scary, but just because Alabama needs to go into this game with a mindset of we have to control the football in order to not let the total plays get out of hand. And one of the ways you do that is by sustaining drives. And sometimes to sustain drives, you have to be successful on 4th downs.
Right.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let's say real quick about the using Jalen design keeps. I would pretty much agree that I don't know that I want it to be a part of the early game plan, because on the off chance that he does get hurt, you'd probably rather him get hurt later in the game or rather than earlier in the game.
No.
And depends on the score, I guess.
Well, yeah, but if you want, I mean, and another thing, if you don't want to do, and if you don't even want to run him on short yardage plays, NC State had a fair amount of success running Wildcat, and I know we haven't seen that.
I did see, yeah,
Alabama this year, but that's an alternative if you don't even want to do that.
I think what NC State did well is they were kind of creative in short yardage situations, right? Like they knew that their offensive line could not just come out and straight up block the Clemson defensive line. So Dave Doran, I think, did a good job in terms of focusing on making short yardage plays in unconventional ways. I don't think Alabama needs to be quite as creative and unconventional because the Alabama offensive line is still pretty good, right? I mean, like they're still overall a very good unit, despite the fact that they're kind of being criticized a bit, or seen as kind of like a very vulnerable unit with regards to this specific matchup, but they're still capable, right? Yeah. So,
and especially in the run game, like I think for all the talk about the Clemson defensive line, I think in the run game this is a much more even matchup than people realize going in.
Well, that's an interesting thing too, because I was thinking about this today. If Alabama can just play them even up front, they're probably going to win, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like a lot of the Clemson in most of the Clemson is going to win predictions. What's inherent in those predictions is that the Clemson defensive line is going to significantly outplay the Alabama offensive line. I think that's almost just sort of taken as a given, right? Yeah. So but you don't think it's so much as of a given.
Certainly not in the run game. I mean, I was being hyperbolic, but like when they're rushing the passer, like that's a complete and utter mismatch.
Yeah.
As intense of a mismatch as Alabama has maybe ever seen in the Saban era. And that's not even so much a knock on these guys in pass protection, just as it is that the Clemson defensive line is that good.
They're not going to block Wilkins or Farrell on passing downs, like especially if they can get like a matchup against Womack or something. That's just going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
So they got to stay out of that.
But in the run game, I don't think the matchup is nearly as severe. The difference is nearly as severe as people think it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so that would be really, really helpful in terms of their chances to win. So do we want to move on to the other side of the ball?
Yeah, sure. So when you're talking about Clemson's offense in 2017, it begins and the what you're talking about is Kelly Bryant.
Yeah.
The offense is so dependent on him. And sure, it was very dependent on Deshaun Watson last year, but it's dependent on him as a runner. I mean, if you compare the passing stats, Bryant this year has 2,700 yards on 360 attempts, 13 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Last year, Deshaun had 4,600 yards on 580 completions, 41 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. This is not Deshaun Watson. This is very much not Deshaun Watson, which is the number one thing when people come to me and they say, how are we going to win this game? Is what I tell them is Kelly Bryant is not Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
He's if Alabama fans think Jalen's getting too many carries, so Jalen has 116 carries on the year. And this is on Football Study Hall. This is the advanced stat, so I think this has sacks filtered out.
Okay.
So this is Jalen has 116 carries. Damian has 110. Bo has 108. Kelly Bryant has 152 carries, and Clemson's main backs each have 103.
Yeah, they run him a lot. They run him a lot on design keeps. They run him a lot in the option game. Like, they run him a lot. And I can promise that a big part of Alabama's game plan is to really hit him a lot early in the game, kind of similar to what it was against Watson last year, like sort of go out of their way to get some opportunities to rough him up a little bit, because he is like, their offense is so dependent on him. Mm-hmm. And it's not like every offense is dependent on a quarterback, but like everything that they do is predicated on him playing really well.
Yep. I mean, you think about the Syracuse game, which I'll remind you that Clemson lost to a Syracuse team that did not make a bowl. So he went down with a concussion at one point during that game. They were already losing at that point, in large part because he had an ankle injury and was just completely ineffective as a runner. So if your offense is so dependent on your quarterback, especially as a runner, that with him on a hurt ankle, you're going to be losing to like 5-7 Syracuse team, something like that. If you're going to lose to a team that doesn't make a bowl because your quarterback was out and was limited before he was out, your offense is very dependent on its quarterback. Like, I will promise you that Alabama would not have lost to Syracuse if Jalen had gotten hurt and Tua would have had to come in.
So what are Alabama's chances? Let's sort of talk about the running game, I guess, first. What are Alabama's chances of stopping them from running the football?
Pretty good, I think. I mean, I'll believe that a team is going to have. I mean, I know people look back at Mississippi State and Auburn and think that was a performance by Alabama against the run that they're not used to seeing. But one, they're healthier than they were in those games,
Right.
and
two, they played better than the narrative suggests, right?
Right, and he like Kerryon Johnson ended up getting a decent chunk of yards in the game against Auburn. Would you say that? I don't know. It just for the most part, they did a very, very good job against Kerryon, and I don't know. I'll believe you can beat Alabama with a really running based attack. When I see it, basically.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. So, like, before we talk about scheme, what do we think about the actual matchups in this game as far as like the Alabama front against the offensive line, against the Clemson offensive line?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not terribly impressed by the Clemson offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, they returned a lot of players, right? The center, I think, is new. I don't think he's such a great player.
For me, that matchup depends so much on. It's just so unknown what Christian Miller and Terrell Lewis are going to be now that they are presumably fully healthy.
Yeah.
Because we haven't seen that from them. I mean, I like the matchup of Deron Payne against an inexperienced center. I don't know that I expect a whole lot out of Alabama's other defensive linemen, mostly because we just haven't seen a whole lot.
I think Raekwon's going to play well. I think he played well. I think he played well against Auburn. I think he's going to play well in this game.
But just because the Alabama defensive front hasn't dominated people the way it has the last couple of years, they've still been extremely solid up front, and they've still been very good against the run. And so I don't see this Clemson team as being a team that is so overwhelmingly good in the running game, whether that's the line, in particular the line, if we're restricting ourselves to that matchup. I don't see this Clemson team as being that team that just overwhelms them at the point of attack.
I think, what do you think about, like, what are they going to do in terms of standard down personnel? Are we going to see any two outside linebacker sets here? Like, are Lewis and Miller going to give them standard down snaps, or is it just going to be Jennings paired with 3 defensive linemen? Because the depth situation suddenly improves dramatically if one of those guys gives them standard down snaps, right? And you don't have to have 3 defensive linemen always out there.
Yeah, I would hope to see Lewis on standard downs.
Yeah.
If they feel confident about how Miller's going to play on those downs, then I'd be fine with him out there. I don't know that I necessarily expect that from him because I see him as more of a pure rusher type. And really, I feel like if you can get snaps where you can, on standard downs, get Anfernee Jennings and Terrell Lewis out there, I like that combination. You know, we talked about all year about how Anfernee has really surprised us with how well he's played, not just as sort of this kind of not terribly explosive run stopper that we saw him as before, but he's been pretty good at making plays and getting in the backfield. And I know he doesn't have a lot of sacks or anything like that, but he has plenty of hurries, and I've just been really impressed with his play. So I think if Lewis is all the way healthy and playing like the kind of player that we hope he can be, then there's a very good chance that they could get standard down snaps with those 2 guys out there. And like you were saying, I think that's a huge benefit to the depth.
Yeah, Mitch, where do you see the personnel being on standard downs?
Same. I mean, if we are going to see Lewis and Miller, I would prefer to see Miller. I think he probably holds up better against the run.
Miller?
Lewis.
Okay, Lewis. Yeah, I think that's probably the more sort of conventional take. I think that Miller can play the run too, but I think Lewis is a better player. I think he sort of packs more punch, so I think I'd like to see him too.
He's just looking at it in a very raw way, he's just a bigger guy who you kind of more expect to be able to hold up against offensive linemen on standard downs at the point of attack. But like I said, if they have confidence that Miller can do that, yeah, do it. And like the more depth, the better.
I'd like to get guys on, like, with how much option game Clemson runs. I'd like to get guys, more athletic guys, on the ends of the line of scrimmage, because, like, I saw, they tried to forgetting his name. What's the Burns, right? That's the defensive end for Florida State, the really fast, kind of light, athletic defensive end. Yeah, he blew up. He sort of attacked the mesh point twice in that game and blew it up and caused fumbles. And I think that that's something that you could see from like a Lewis or even an Anthony Jennings if they kind of do that. I'd really like to see a very sort of aggressive attacking defense against the option game, rather than sort of a more passive, like, defend your gaps, play sound football, force the give, limit the gain, attack them, because without the same fear of the quarterback as a passer, I think that you can be more aggressive than they've been in the last 2 years in terms of defending the quarterback run game. So I want to see them, like, bringing guys over, attack the mesh point, scrape a defender over to that vacated side to deal with any action that might come that way. Be aggressive.
Right.
I want to see the front flying around. A lot of these guys, Rashaan Evans is best when he's playing as fast as possible. And I'd like to see a lot of that. What do you say?
That'd be fun.
That'd be fun. Yeah. Yeah. Now Clemson's going to try to get to the perimeter too, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how much success do we think they're going to have there? Probably some, right? The one good thing that I like is I like the Alabama DBs out there in space defeating blocks.
Mm-hmm.
I like Minka. I like Minka out there in space defeating blocks. I like Ronnie coming down from a safety position. I don't really know much about Deontay Thompson as a tackler, but hopefully he, plays well.
Yeah, I like them. I like Alabama's chances to defend the perimeter in the run game better than I like Clemson's.
What? Why?
Just because I think they have better tacklers in the secondary.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Just in terms of, I do think Alabama's backs in general are better than Clemson's. Etienne and Feaster are very, very good, but I think Damian and Bo and Jacobs are a little bit better.
Yeah, making tackles on the perimeter is going to go a long way too, right? Like, when we talk about Alabama having success in the perimeter run game, part of that is dependent on the fact that we think the Alabama backs are going to be able to break tackles on the perimeter. We think they're going to be able to make guys miss, shed tackles, get extra yards. Alabama needs to limit Clemson from doing the same thing. And I agree. I think, Feaster's okay. Etienne has had a good year. But it doesn't really concern me too much on the perimeter. Like, they struggled a lot with Gallman, right? In terms of, they didn't struggle much with him in terms of his overall performance, but they struggled to tackle him more than I expected they would the last 2 years. And it's very important that does not repeat itself in this game. So,
okay, so let's turn a bit to the reader comments.
Yes.
Which we have a couple of. The first one I just want to get out is from @jbash1234, who asks, Ben, where are you from?
New York. I saw that one. Yeah, I am from New York. So I get this out of the way. I have family in Alabama. I was down in Alabama for school for a little bit. So that's kind of the origins of my Alabama fandom, despite my New York origins. So yeah, I guess my accent probably kind of stands out for a lot of people listening.
A little bit.
So yeah, so for anybody that doesn't already know, and I mean, if you followed me on Twitter for a while, you probably know that I'm from New York just because of some other sort of sports related tweets. But if you're new and you don't,
they got Stanton. I can't believe Derek Jeter bought the Yankees, and his first act was to trade Giancarlo Stanton to the Yankees.
yeah. So that's a good way to sustain success, right? Is to kind of like plan owners for.
Good Lord.
But yeah, so that's okay. So we appreciate that question. What else do we got on the
we've also got a number of comments from at Lance Shin, which I will try to give in order. This one was from a half hour ago, so sorry if we're this is tracking a bit back to the offense. He says, "You guys said who do you take runs away from, and I think it is the Jalen runs you take out.
Right.
Let him run a few and still scramble, obviously, but I think the option allows teams to key in on Jalen in run and pass plays, which severely limits play action passing." And you just hit on it. I'm not sure what it was. It's not to guarantee success, but to not put that defense on the field all night again, which I think was to our sort of points about
Right.
staying on the field and sustaining drives. So what do we think about limiting Jalen, and in particular limiting the option game as a way of sort of getting more carries to the backs and keeping defenses from keying in on Jalen?
Yeah, so on those midline reads, I expect the vast majority of them to be gives to the running backs, right? Because I think when they option that defensive tackle, I think he's kind of just going to stand pat and control his gap and force the give.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of those option plays will turn into just regular run plays, just run plays where the numbers are controlled better. But also, I think that they're not. I don't know how many option plays there are going to be where the end man on the line of scrimmage is going to be run, because those haven't really been all that successful, especially against ends that are as good as these Clemson ends. So I'm not sure. I think the option game is going to play a very big part in this game, but I think the option game is just going to sort of serve the purpose of allowing yourself to block. Like, the option game is going to be just an extension of the regular run game. It's not going to be about getting Jalen the ball on carries. It's going to simply be about gaining a numbers advantage and forcing a defensive lineman to commit himself to stopping the quarterback from running the football. Because I don't think that Jalen is going to get a ton of opportunities to carry the ball off option plays.
Yeah.
But then the design runs, I mean, I think that you're going to see Jalen run the ball in short yardage situations. I think if they have success on the perimeter runs early in the game, you're going to see Jalen have more opportunities to run the ball between the tackles, even on standard downs. And I think you're probably going to see them try to work Jalen on a few counters on design keeps. Because if you really can get the defense moving horizontally and have success in that area, then you bring Jalen back on a counter coming to the other direction. So I think those are probably the areas that you're going to see Jalen running, but I don't think you're going to see the same emphasis on it that you did against Auburn, for instance.
Yeah. Okay, then more recent from at Lance Shin. This is with Alabama on defense. Clemson is the only team in the playoff that isn't in the top, and I think this is going to dovetail into some stuff that we were about to talk about anyway, but Clemson is the only team in the playoff that isn't in the top 12 in yards per play, ranked 37th in rushing yards per carry and 85th in yards per attempt passing. I think if you don't bust, bend, don't break, they can make life very difficult for Clemson. This is also why I would want more runs on offense. They're 57th overall in yards per play. The narrative is Alabama offense is going to struggle to get explosive plays, but Clemson has to really deviate from their character to start getting explosive plays against even this Alabama defense.
I think that's a really great point. So what are, in terms of, so those are sort of the more traditional stats. What are the advanced? Does anybody have the advanced stats pulled up? Because I think the advanced stats bear that out pretty well too, right? That Clemson really does not get a lot of explosive plays either through the air or on the ground.
Overall offensive explosiveness, 119th, 91st in rushing ISO PPP, and 121st in passing ISO PPP.
So that's kind of a really big and under talked about aspect of this game, that Clemson's path toward moving the ball down the field and scoring points is going to have to be through sustained drives, right?
Yeah.
It's going to have to be through sustained drives, and it's probably going to have to come by way of running the football to sustain those drives. It's not going to come by way, of big plays. And if you look at their players, like, it makes sense, right? They don't have a great game breaker at the running back position who's going to break off an 80-yarder against you. McLeod and Renfro are good receivers. They're fast, but they're too small to really consistently make big plays down the field. And Kane is bigger, but he's sort of not as fast, and he's not like a game breaker at wide receiver. So there's not like a lot of vertical components to their game. Like, they don't have guys like Mike Williams anymore or Jordan Leggett out of the tight end position, guys like that who are going to hit big plays against you. I guess they got this freshman receiver, Trey Higgins, who's more in that sort of big play mold, but he just isn't as central part of the offense as those other guys.
Kane has 52 catches, Renfro has 55, McLeod has 47, and Higgins has 17.
Right. So, if they're going to get a big play from the wide receiver, maybe it's him. But, like, he doesn't see the field as much as those guys, and they're just not all that big play oriented. They are really very run oriented. They love their short passes. They will throw some fades to Kane and some other sort of one-on-one isolated throws to him, but they're not really about big plays. So now Lance's point is, he says, if you don't bust, bend, don't break. But so let me get specifically to the bend, don't break part.
Yeah, see, I would look at that. I think it's a very good overall point about Clemson's explosiveness, but my thought on that would be to play it sort of the exact opposite way.
Yeah.
Don't give it, because they're not explosive anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Like, make them do what they're not comfortable doing. Don't give up an inch.
Yeah.
Like,
and if they are going to score, we want them to score quickly, right? We don't want to run up the play total.
Yeah.
So,
let them do the things like exactly. Like, that's, I don't really want to let them score, but I agree. And we've seen in the past how, like, big plays have hurt Alabama, right? Like, getting big plays have hurt Alabama. Alabama's offensive plan 2 years ago was so dependent on big plays that the defense was just totally shot by the end of the game. So, if they're going to score, I'm just struggling with the if they're gonna score for what, just overall though, challenge them to hit big plays, right?
Yes.
Like, don't concede anything in the underneath. I talked about this a little bit on Twitter about playing a lot of cover one, right? So playing cover one, bringing an extra defensive back down to defend these multiple, like 3-4 wide receiver sets, to not give up those free quick yards underneath. Don't be in situations where you've got a linebacker on Renfro. Challenge them. Like, challenge them to play you. Challenge them to make throws where the ball has to travel 10, 15, 20 yards down the field. Do not give them 5-6 yards free through the air on standard downs. Now, if you do that, inevitably they're going to throw the ball a lot to Kane, I think, right? Like, they're going to see him isolated against press coverage. They're going to throw fades to him. They're going to throw fade stops to him. I think he's like 6'3", so he's a pretty big wide receiver. He's got like a lot of size. So, do you guys want to shadow him with Averett? This is something that I talked about on Twitter. It kind of got a mixed.
It might be something that you kind of keep in your back pocket as an option, because I guess the worry there is putting a bigger, more physical. You want your best corner on their best guy, basically. But at the same time, like, the worries I have for Levi Wallace are not that a big, strong receiver is going to outmuscle him for the ball. It's that he's going to get beat down the field by someone faster.
And you're worried about McLeod there in that situation with how fast he is, kind of beating him deep down the field.
Yeah, because I think Levi's primary issue is top end athleticism. Like, there's a reason he was a walk-on, right? So if you end up with Wallace on Kane and he's just getting beat over and over again, then make the adjustment like you did in 2013 against Mike Evans. Not that it worked against Mike Evans, but
or 2015 against Malcolm Mitchell, right? They put Cyrus on him. Yeah, that's kind of a more recent example that actually worked.
Yeah. So keep that in your back pocket, but I don't think that's necessarily something that you have to come out doing.
Mitch, where do you come down on that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely think the challenge with Wallace is more down the field.
Right.
And I really only watched the NC State game and maybe the Louisville game earlier, but they didn't really seem to use McLeod in the vertical passing game very much.
So that's interesting, right? So my thinking then, my reason for wanting Averett on Kane is pretty simple. I think that if you show Kelly Bryant a lot of single high coverages, I think he's going to throw the ball a lot to Kane. Mm-hmm. Kane got a lot more targets this year than McLeod overall. He was the favorite receiver of Kelly. What did you say that again, Carter?
80 targets for Kane, 61 for McLeod.
Right. And that's that's a pretty substantial difference, right? And especially I think when you show him single high, I think he's going to be even more apt to look for Kane. And I just want my best corner to be the one that's being thrown at, right? I don't want them to be able.
That's fair.
But I see the matchup point too, and I see the speed thing as being a problem also, and that's why I don't expect it.
Yeah.
I don't expect them to come out. Also, because this is just not something that they do too much of. But like, Averett's played so well this year. Teams just don't throw the ball at him. Like that Auburn and Mississippi State, like, just did not throw the ball at him at all. And that's kind of a function of the fact that they think that they can pick on Wallace, and also a function of the fact that Averett is just a really good player at this point. So I'm just thinking, like, man, I either want to make Clemson throw to their best receiver, but also have to go at Alabama's best corner, or don't throw at their best receiver if they want to, like, or if they want to go at Alabama's worst corner, don't throw at their best receiver. So maybe that's a little bit simplistic, but like,
that's fair.
I just want Averett to be involved more in the game plan, because I think they're going to throw at Kane no matter what.
Right.
So, I mean, we'll see. I don't expect it, but I guess we'll see what happens. Do we have any more comments?
Lance follows up and says, "Thanks for commenting. I think you're right. Go get them, make them be explosive." I guess more what I mean is the do your job mantra and not busting to help them become explosive.
Definitely.
Which we have just one that's just somebody saying a nice thing. At mharper05, Michael Harper says, "I didn't get to finish, but great stuff, guys. It's nice to hear someone really dive into the X's and O's and give some in-depth analysis. I really feel like the national media has been very lazy in their analysis of the playoffs." Thank you, Michael. That is exactly what we strive for when we do this show. So it's good to see.
Yeah.
Good when people are appreciating our efforts.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I would say that last part about the national media being lazy in their analysis of the playoff, why should this year be any different than other years?
Yeah.
Anything else?
At Philip82_2 says, "Can you guys provide one example of one complete game in 2017 against a quality opponent in which the offense, the OC, and Jalen, and offense and/or OC and/or Jalen executed at a high level that can give fans confidence that we will beat Clemson?"
So basically, he wants an example of when the offense just played great against a really good opponent. So, okay, so by that definition, it has to be, he says, against a quality opponent. So how many quality opponents did they play this year?
I guess you're basically limiting that to
it's not many.
Auburn, LSU, Mississippi State, and I would say still opening.
Florida State, absolutely.
Florida State, yeah.
Absolutely. So Florida State's out because they didn't block Florida State at all, so that's out. Jalen played really well against LSU. Like, he played great against LSU, but like they just missed some. I guess, is that the example of the most complete game that they played? They didn't run the ball exceptionally well in that game.
Well, Mississippi State was weird because they
missed.
They kept hitting these big plays early. It was a weird game on offense. Like, they weren't dominant, but they also did really well in some areas. And just the nature of the game, the weird way it kind of turned out. I don't know, but that was an odd one.
And Auburn was weird too, in that like they just kept barely not being able to sustain drives.
Right.
Like, it seemed like every drive there was just some very tiny microscopic thing that would go wrong that would prevent them from sustaining a drive and really kind of getting more into their offense. Like, I think against Auburn, I think they were super close to putting together a game on offense that really would have impressed people, which I know sounds weird to say in a game where they only scored 14 points, but like, considering the quality of Auburn's defense, I think that they showed the ability to do a lot of really good things, even if ultimately they weren't able to do all of those really good things play after play after play. So
yeah, so I guess the ultimate answer to the question is no. There isn't a game this year against a great opponent where you can point to it and say the Alabama offense was dominant in this game.
Right.
But there were several of them where you can say if they just done if it just one thing or a thing here, a thing there, a handful of things had gone differently, and this is not Big Loss. Like, well, if they had just blocked them. It's a drop here, a route run 1 yard short of the sticks there. It's things like that. They have so many performances where they were just that close.
Yeah, and here's my if you're looking for confidence in the Alabama offense to perform in this game, here's what I would say. Jalen did not play well against Auburn, but he played well against LSU and Mississippi State. And if he plays that well again, they're going to have a really good shot to move the ball in this game. Further, against Auburn, okay, despite how good the Auburn defensive line is and how good they are against the run, and we just got through talking about how they're probably somewhat comparable to Clemson in that department, Alabama did really well running the ball, especially with their backs. I think they averaged like 5.5 yards a carry with their backs in that game. So they were very successful in that game, and they did a lot of good things. And as we talked about earlier in the podcast, they did a lot of things in that game, in the running game, that I think we all think can be effective in this game.
Right.
So if you're looking for, we can't, like Carter said, we can't give you one example of one game in which they put it all together. Like, we can't say they did it here, they did all of these things you want here, so they're going to do it here. But we can give you a reason to feel optimistic about the different components of this offense, and which kind of leads me to believe that it's possible that they can put it together in this game. The other thing that I would say, and I think that we've talked about the game sort of one side of the ball and then the other side of the ball in isolation, but if you put everything together, the hope is that they don't need to play an amazing game on offense in order to win, right? The hope is that they can win this game by scoring like 21 or 24 points, and that will be enough. And in order to get to that point total, they don't need to play this complete, awesome offensive game. They just need to play a good, solid, mistake-free, ball control, sustaining drives offensive game, and that game can win it if the defense does their part. And I think that can definitely happen.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there's no reason to believe that it can't. I also want to say, like, I personally think that they're going to have a really good offensive plan in this game. I can't guarantee that it's going to work, but I think they're going to have an offensive plan that does a really good job at attacking the things that Clemson doesn't do so well on defense and negating Clemson's strength. And I think I have full faith and confidence 100% in the coaches to put the players that they're going to put the players in a position to succeed in this game. There are doubts in my mind about how a lot of things are going to turn out in this game, but that is one area in which I really do not have any reservations. I think that the offensive game plan is going to be good, and I think the players are going to have lots of opportunities to succeed on Monday night.
Yeah. And also just to tack onto that, I think there has been a lot of unfair criticism of Brian Dable over the last month or so of the season. for issues related to Alabama's offensive performance that I don't think are related to him.
Right.
And so I think he and Saban are gonna put together a really good game plan. And it doesn't hurt that he is 100% focused on the job. Sorry, Lane.
Yeah. No, that helps a lot. So like, just kind of coming back, are we done? Are there any more comments toward us? Okay. If anybody has any more, keep them coming. This is a very enjoyable part of the show for us. So on going back sort of to defense for a second, where do we think that Clemson can best hurt Alabama? Like, what do you go into this game like really worried about? Like, I mean, so like last year you would go in and you would say, man, I don't know how they're going to stop Deshaun Watson from throwing the ball to guys like Leggett and guys like Leggett. Yeah, Williams, yeah.
So that's just the thing, and part of what gives me a lot of confidence about this game is there is not an element of Clemson's offense that really scares me. They're good. They do a fair number of things well, and if Alabama can't sustain the main thing that worries me about Alabama being on defense is if the play count differential starts to go up.
Yeah.
And they just wear the defense down and they start breaking off big runs, and Alabama misses tackles and misses assignments and things like that.
That's where I think they'll start to have more success on the ground is once the total play count builds up against Alabama.
Right. But if it doesn't come to that, if it's not a situation where Alabama's defense is just worn out from having to play so many plays, then I think they've got a really good chance of forcing Clemson into a pretty bad offensive performance.
Yeah. How confident are you guys in their ability to defend Renfro this year? Now, let me just to sort of tie this back. Little context here. This guy scored 2 touchdowns 2 years ago. He scored 2 touchdowns last year. So he scored 4 touchdowns in 2 games combined against Alabama. How many touchdowns total does he have this year?
Is it 2? Is it something like that?
3.
3, yeah.
3.
So in 4 games combined, or in 2 games combined against Alabama, he has 1 more touchdown than he's had in 13 games this year. He last year, so this was very interesting to me. Last year, Clemson converted on 5 third and 5 plus. So basically 5 third and longs they converted last year. 4 of those 5 went to Renfro.
Yeah.
And watching and for what it's worth, watching Clemson this year, I don't have the numbers in terms of who Cully Bryant targets on third downs, but man, just from just anecdotally, he throws to Renfro on third downs a lot. That is who he wants to throw the ball to on third downs. Like Renfro. So the larger question is, what do you guys think about their chances of stopping Renfro this year? But the first question I want to ask is, clearly Renfro has been good player, right? Very good player, good slot receiver. Clearly he's been disproportionately successful against Alabama relative to what he is normally. Is there something about Alabama that makes them more susceptible to him like having a good game, or is this just small sample size flukiness?
I think it's a healthy element of sample size and a healthy element of Deshaun Watson.
Yes.
I do not think Renfro is some kind of like he's a possession receiver that's unremarkable physically. He is not Alabama fans, I think, have far too much built this guy up in their mind as some kind of Alabama slaying monster.
Yeah. I think another element too is that in 2015, he was going against then true freshman Minka Fitzpatrick, who was a good player, but true freshman he just didn't have his best game then, right, against Renfro. And last year he was going against Tony Brown, and we love Tony Brown. I love Tony Brown.
We are all crazy Tony fans here.
We all love Crazy Tony. Crazy Tony walking through the LSU team, warming up. Like, these are moments that I'm gonna, cherish. Moments I'll remember. I like Crazy Tony a lot. And Crazy Tony is in some ways a good player. He is physical against the run. He does some, blitz as well. Like, he's a good physical player for a defensive back. But Crazy Tony in coverage is not the best player that Alabama has, which is disappointing because he was supposed to be so good. But anyways, he has not been the best coverage player for Alabama. So, and he didn't have a great game last year against Renfro. Although I want to say that the final play was not his fault at all. But but beyond that, he did not have a good game. So this year, hopefully he's not on Renfro that much.
Yeah.
Do on that dude and jam his ass.
Yeah. What do we think as far as how often is he going to be? Let's talk about that. How often is Tony going to be on Renfro? We all agree that's bad. How often is that going to happen? How often is Alabama going to be in dime? Because Clemson very rarely plays with more than 3 wide receivers on the field at any one time. They're really a very sort of classic 11 personnel team. So how often, and Tony is only going to see the field, barring injury, when Alabama is in dime. So how often is Alabama going to be in dime? Is it just passing downs, just third downs? Is there any chance that they play more dime, especially with the linebacker situation thin? Right now we only have 2 inside linebackers that we really want to play in this game, so that they play more dime on standard downs in order to give those guys more of a breather?
I don't see any particular reason. When your main concern here is defending the quarterback and the option run game, I don't see a whole lot of reason to play more dime unless you really are that concerned about the inside linebackers.
Yeah. So the question is going to become, so what they'll do then, okay, so let's say that Alabama's a nickel. So what they'll do then is they'll play, let's say, McLeod. If they go 3-by-1, they'll play McLeod out wide at the number 1. They'll move the tight end. Who's the tight end? What's the name of the tight end this year? I really should know this.
Walker. It's is it Herschel Walker's nephew or something?
Oh, his name is
Richard.
Richard,
yeah.
Richard, okay. So they're gonna move him out, and they're gonna move McLeod out to the 1. They'll probably flex him out to the 2, and then they'll play Renfro at number 3. So that presents a real challenge for Alabama, right? Because we don't want Renfro being guarded by a linebacker, which means Alabama probably needs to bump a safety down. What I'm looking for Alabama to do when they have to bump that safety down is I'm looking for them to bump the safety down, whether it's Ronnie or Deontay Thompson, to guard the number 2, the tight end, in that number 2 spot. And I want Minka. I think that Alabama's best served by getting Minka on Renfro as much as possible in this game.
Yeah, same.
And they're going to try to.
Are you? I don't know. Are you comfortable with, if the tight end's out there? Are you comfortable with, say, walking Mac out there? If you're gonna.
So I just think it gets. Yeah, if you do that, they're going to attack that with switch routes and stuff. If you get Mac out more in coverage, if you can walk Mac out and just play on the number 3 in the slot, that gets him closer to the box and less vulnerable to perimeter passing plays. You could do that. They'll do some of that. It's just kind of a very unconventional alignment to put an inside linebacker against the number 2. But if they flex the tight end and running back all the way out wide, Alabama could walk Mac Wilson all the way out there to guard him, that basically confines you to man coverage. But man coverage on them against them on standard downs might not be the worst thing, right? Because they love to run.
I think we'll see a fair amount of that.
Yeah, exactly. They love on standard downs to hit you with all those little quick, short passing concepts. So maybe like playing man coverage against them against those plays would not be the worst thing in the world. And if you do that, you could maybe still stay in your two deep shell some.
Yeah, I should have been like I don't want to run Mac out on the number 2 in a trip set, but like if the tight end, like this tight end is not Jordan Leggett, and as good as Mac is in coverage, I'm comfortable having him out on a tight end,
But if he flexes, so if they flex the tight end out to the number 1 and you walk Mac out there and you stay in man coverage, which I think could be very successful at defending like standard down pass concepts that Clemson runs at you.
Yeah.
But in that situation, you're playing the run. You're playing a 5-man offensive line, no blocking tight ends, quarterback, running back. So you're playing those 7 guys with 4 down linemen and Rashaan Evans in the middle. So that's a question. Like
that's true.
Right. Now the safeties, now you've got your safeties playing some version of quarters. So like they'll be able to kind of fill and help against the run. But at the immediate point of attack, you've got, let's say, just for argument's sake, let's say you've got Anthony Jennings, Deron Payne, Raekwon Davis, and Deshaun Hand. You've got those 4 guys plus Rashaan Evans at Mike going against Clemson's running game. Can those guys hold up in that situation? And they'll run some option, right? So they steal a number back that way.
That's what I was thinking about.
That's tough. Yeah.
So that's kind of my concern with that. Now, I think you can do some of that. And like if Deron plays out of his mind and is just blowing up the middle, is just blowing up the interior of their defensive line, then you can probably do that and get away with it. And especially if like your safeties are playing great and filling quickly against the run, it'll be interesting. It's like one of like these are some questions that we can't really answer because we don't really know how the coaching staff feels about some certain things. We also don't have the same information or the same ability to evaluate things as a coaching staff. But like, so for anybody who's like listening, like if there's things you want to watch, like that's going to be one of the most interesting things on standard downs. How often does Alabama stay in a 2 deep shell versus how often do they bring one of those safeties down to cover a wide receiver or tight end flexed out and play like an extra man in the box against the Clemson rush attack? Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think they should play a lot of cover 1 in this game, but we'll see. We'll see what they do. I don't know. Do we have any other questions?
Nope. Just a response from @Philip82_2 saying, I really appreciate you guys taking and answering my question. I will say hearing you guys intelligently break down the component parts to this point imperfectly synthesized in the execution, admittedly, does give me more confidence than I had a week ago.
It's good to have confidence.
It is. It is.
Like, Alabama's really good.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of fans have gotten lost in and many of national media who are picking Clemson in this game have gotten lost in this year.
Which is fine, by the way. Like, picking Clemson to win is – sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But picking Clemson to win is totally justifiable.
Oh, yeah. This is not – I certainly wouldn't say anyone picking Clemson to win this game is crazy or anything like that. Right. And it's a larger point with the playoff as a whole, which is kind of what's exciting this year is this is the first time you've gone into the playoff and you can look at any of the 4 teams – and make not only an intelligent and reasonable, but actually a compelling case that team is going to win the national championship.
Yeah. But just to sort of go back though, like Alabama's really good. Like they're clearly one of the 4 best teams in the country.
Yeah, think about, we talked about this last week, that all of the people whose opinions we would sort of value on, national writer type people who really know football saying, that it's a no-brainer that Alabama shouldn't have been in over Ohio State because they're
right
teams. Think about the just the fact that they're favored, right? They're favored over Clemson in this game by Vegas, and Vegas usually knows a thing or two.
Yeah.
They're actually the highest ranked of any of the 4 teams in the playoff in S&P Plus, because Ohio State is still number 1. But like, I mean, I think Alabama is second, Georgia is third, Clemson is 7th, and Oklahoma is 8th. Like, there is plenty of subjective evaluations by people who know what they're talking about besides us, and plenty of objective criteria that you can evaluate these teams by and say Alabama is the better team. Alabama should win this game.
Do you guys sense the same level of pessimism within the fan base that I do? I mean, just like being on Twitter and interacting with people, like I feel like people are super pessimistic about this.
Yeah.
Mitch, where do you agree? You see some more optimism than we do? Like,
oh, sorry, no, I was laughing because I was trying to look up. ESPN has FPI, and I was looking for Alabama, and Alabama's not even there. It must be like a glitch or something. They're not even on. They're not even in the 119.
They're not ranked on FPI.
They're not even. Well, it's every D1 team, and they're not even. I don't know. It must be an error or something.
Oh, yeah, they're not even in there.
Because I was curious, like how high they were in FPI, but I don't even see them. So,
well, that's interesting.
If you go back a week, I guess this is post-championship games.
Weird.
They're number 1. Okay, so
yeah,
week 15, they're number 1.
I don't know what current this.
Why are fans so pessimistic?
I don't know. Why? I don't know. Is it the same fans that want Tua at quarterback?
Yeah, so that's one thing, right? Like if you want Tua at quarterback, then you think Jalen sucks, and you think Alabama can't win with Jalen, so then you're going to be probably pretty pessimistic. I mean, but like. And I guess like they lost to Clemson last year, and they also just lost to Auburn.
And there's the injuries which had gotten better, and then they lost Dylan Moses again, and there's not the confidence of knowing what this Alabama team would look like right now if they had been fully healthy all season.
My thought on this game, my sort of overall thought on this game, is that it is a complete toss-up. Is that more or less how you guys see it? Do you see one team being a slight favorite here? Because I struggle. I can see arguments for both of the teams being slight favorites. Do you guys see one team as being more of a slight favorite than the other team? Do you see it as straight toss-up, or do you see it as something more? Do you see one team as being like a more significant favorite?
I would give Alabama a slight edge.
Same.
And just because, it's like I talked about, there's just not their offense doesn't. Clemson's offense doesn't. It hasn't all. I've been saying this all season.
Right.
Not some new gumping thing. Clemson's offense has not impressed me all season long.
Yeah. What's Clemson's offense according to S&P Plus, just overall?
Is that right? 35th? Is that right?
35th.
Yeah.
And what's Alabama?
It's like 6 or something, right?
Much higher.
6? That's high. That would be really high.
19.
Oh, 9.
Okay. But still kind of considerably better. Like, so the 35th offense is not really all that good. I mean, like, it's good relative to, like, all the teams, but, like, it's not good relative to...
It's not elite.
No. Like, Alabama typically eats up. I would wonder, like...
Last year, for reference, Clemson's offense was second.
Yeah. What about the year before? Can we do 2015?
6th.
Yep.
6th. Yeah, so top 10. I guess Oklahoma was probably number 1 last year, according to S&P Plus, but Clemson was the best offense in the country. Like, I don't care who actually number 1 was. I'm assuming it was Oklahoma just because I know they scored a bazillion points last year. But, like, I think that Clemson was the best. So, like, now Alabama's defense is not as good as it was the past 2 years, but it's still really good. And what is Alabama's defense by S&P Plus
This year?
Yeah.
Third.
So that's like a sizable margin. I would be super interested to know what offenses ranked like 30 or worse by S&P Plus have done against Alabama over the last like 6 or 7 or 8 years. I'm guessing probably not so well.
Let me pop on over to Football Outsiders and see S&P Plus ratings offense 2017.
I feel like people have discussed, like when people talk about this game, they focus on the fact that the Clemson offense or the Clemson defense against the Alabama offense is a mismatch. And that's probably true to some extent. Like Clemson is definitely, I definitely think that the Clemson defense as a unit is better than the Alabama offense. But there doesn't seem to be as much focus as there should be on the other side of the ball and the advantage that the Alabama defense has over the Clemson offense. I do agree that with people that the Clemson offense has played better lately, like their last 2 games were better. But then you have to remember that they're going to not have played for a month. And like for whatever you make about like momentum and players coming together over like the final 2 weeks of the season, which they seem to do against South Carolina and Miami, that's not necessarily going to be able to be carried over into their next game when you went like, it's not probably a full month, but it's close to a full month. It's like 4 weeks, right? Between maybe 4 weeks plus 2 days or something like that. So you've gone like a long time without playing. So that's going to be a problem for them in this game potentially, is that layoff and maybe stifling whatever momentum they or whatever they were starting to figure out on the offensive side of the ball. And also Clemson has seen one defense even in the same the only defense that Clemson has seen that's even close to the same level as Alabama's defense this year is Auburn. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah. And didn't they have like linebackers hurt too?
I don't remember. That could be. But like in that game, Auburn played really well defensively. You know, it was in Clemson. They gave up 14 points. I think on those 2 drives where Clemson scored points, they hit 3 deep shot fades down the sidelines to Kane and McLeod. So you know, again, so their success in that game was based on a lot of low percentage throws. Like, I don't see any reason why the Alabama defense cannot put together a very similar performance to what Auburn did.
Yep, I agree.
And I think that's
just for a record of offenses this year that are in the same kind of tier as this Clemson offense. Auburn is 36th, or Clemson's 35th. Auburn is 36th. LSU is 42nd. Arkansas is 45th.
So that's not like elite company.
No.
You know? And I think that there's an important point to make that the drop off from the Clemson offense from the last 2 years to this year is more significant than the drop off that the Alabama defense has had from the last 2 years to this year.
Considerably,
I would say, and that's to be expected. You know, Clemson literally lost their 3 best players from last year's offense: Watson, Williams, and Leggett. Like the three guys that tortured Alabama last year. You know, Renfro hit on the 3rd downs, but it was Williams and Leggett on those 2 drives who were just making play after play, and it was Watson who was throwing them the football. Those guys aren't here anymore, and that's going to be really, really helpful in terms of them not making – like, they made so many plays outside of the X's and O's in the 4th quarter of that game last year. They were just throwing balls up to Mike Williams, and he was just catching them every time because he's just like a beast. But and that play that Leggett made, the catch that Leggett made inside the 10, I feel like that, I don't know why that kind of got lost in the shuffle. But the catch that Leggett made to set up the game-winning touchdown on that throw where he contorted his body as the ball was in midair and then dove toward the sideline. It's like one of the greatest catches I've ever seen. Right? Do you guys think that that play? I've watched this game so many times in the past 2 weeks, and every time I see that play, I'm like, oh my god, that is like an unbelievable.
Insane, yeah.
I cannot believe he caught that.
And I feel like nobody talks about that play. But that's like, I mean, that's like, I don't know. I'm not going to say it's like a David Tyree catch or something, but that's like an incredible catch. Like they don't, at least at the very least, they don't win the game in regulation without that catch. That's like an enormous play. And those guys are gone. I don't think that, like, Kane is a good receiver, but I don't think he's going to do anything like
nowhere near that level.
No, he's not going to do what those guys did. So, I don't know. So we see maybe slight advantage Alabama.
Yeah.
And that's what S&P says, right? S&P has Alabama as like a 3-point favorite. Is that kind of like a reasonable?
Yeah, and let me see if I can. I'm gonna see if I can find see what FPI thinks. But okay, real quick, we should probably we're closing in on the 2-hour mark. Thank you to all 18 of you who are still with us. So we are we will move into let's talk about special teams real quick before we wrap up. This is an area that can be a fairly significant advantage for Alabama. Clemson, their return units are decent. Their kickoffs are fine. They are terrible at punting and field goals.
That's good.
They are terrible at. They're actually they had a kicker to start out the year, Hugel, who was not very good, and then he got hurt and was lost for the year, and they had to bring this walk-on who's like 7 of 12 on the year, and has just not been very good at all. They're terrible at field goal kicking, and their punting's even worse. Like by S&P Plus, they're 107th in field goal value per kick, and they're 118th in punting success rate.
Yeah. Like hitting field goals against Alabama is a really big deal. The last 2 years when Watson was the quarterback and they had all those skill guys, they didn't really need to make field goals because they just scored touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. But this year they're probably going to have to make field goals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I would think so, and
they're not good at that. If you can stop them and make them try to hit a 40-yard field goal, they're not going to hit a 40-yard field goal.
Yeah. And I think that Alabama could be more successful like red zone defense this year if it comes to that.
Yeah.
Last year when Clemson got in the red zone, it just felt like Alabama had absolutely no chance to stop them. I'm not going to feel that way this year. I think the forcing field goals is a definite possibility in this game. So yeah, special teams. We have one more. So
FPI also has Alabama as a slight favorite, by the way.
Okay. Lance asks, he says, another interesting thing about the Clemson-Auburn game this year, Auburn had no carry-on in that game. What's the best offense Clemson played this year?
Let me check in terms of
where's Louisville or Miami?
Louisville, I think it might be Louisville because they're like top 5.
Yeah.
But they were like, if you watch that game, Lamar Jackson was not good in that game. He was just missing guys. Like it was a very un-Lamar like performance.
Right. So let me just pull up.
I think I looked at this earlier. I think Louisville's like, what do we say, 2?
They're 5th in terms of offensive S&P Plus. Okay. By the way, Ole Miss is 11th. Just saying, Alabama held them to 3 points, but
So Clemson, according to S&P Plus, against Louisville, Clemson's defensive percentile performance was 60% against NC State. Where does NC State rank on S&P Plus?
Decent, 28th.
28. So they're pretty decent. They were not good on defense in that game. They were 37th percentile. Now I think they were without a corner or two, but still, 37th percentile, not good. A couple. I mean, there's not. So it's like Louisville. Who's the second best they faced this year?
I think it's NC State.
It is.
Okay. So
there's Wake after that, maybe? Did they play Wake?
There's a lot that's been made about the fact.
Miami's not high, are they? No.
Yeah, Miami's just not very good. I think that's like kind of an interesting point that I want to close with. There has been so much made about how Alabama hasn't really played anybody this year, and the one team that they played beat them. But who has Clemson really played besides Auburn?
Yeah.
Who
they played Syracuse.
They did play Syracuse, yeah. So like, but that's like, isn't that like a big thing, right? Like, so the best team far and away that Clemson played was Auburn, okay?
Yep.
And Auburn A completely shut down their offense, and B did not do anything on offense themselves, but they didn't have their best player, and they didn't really have the same offensive identity that they had later in the year. So the one really good defense that they faced kind of shut them down. They faced a couple decent offenses, and they haven't turned in elite defensive performances, right? The best offense they faced was Louisville, and they turned in 60 percentile defensive performance. Second best was NC State, and they were 37%. So like, against the better units that they faced this year, they haven't fared all that well either. For what it's worth, their offensive percentile against Auburn, which is again, like we talked about, is the only defense on their schedule that comes anywhere close to what the Alabama defense is. Their offensive percentile performance against Auburn, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but whatever. Their offensive percentile performance against Auburn was 18%. So they were bad.
For reference, Alabama's was 13%. So they did about as well against Auburn's defense as Alabama did.
Right. So like, you know, I think that like, I just think it's important. And by the way, just watching those games, Alabama played a lot better than Clemson did offensively. I think probably that's like a success rate thing that bears that why the Alabama offense was only 13%. But like they in terms of their play-to-play execution, it was not that bad. Clemson was a lot worse in that game offensively. So this whole idea that like Alabama finally played somebody and they didn't play all that well. Well, Clemson hasn't played great teams either, because Miami is not.
Same team way earlier in the year when said team was not nearly as good as they were at the end of the year and played about the same.
Right. So this isn't a case. A lot of people have said like Clemson's beaten all these teams on the road who had 8 or more wins. It's just like I'm sorry, but like winning at Virginia Tech is not like super impressive. It doesn't make you some great team. Or winning at South Carolina, like does not make
the fourth quarter against Boston College. They lost to Syracuse. God, I'm trying to remember what they were not just flat out dominant this year. They were not. It was a very close game. They beat Florida State 31-4. A severely diminished Florida State.
Right. I think what's clear is that by the narrative, okay, so by the sort of the media fan narrative, Clemson is a bit overrated and Alabama is a bit underrated.
Yep.
That bears itself out both in terms of the Vegas line and in terms of what the advanced stats say about both of these teams and say about this matchup. So I think that is very clear that we've got a situation where Clemson's abilities are being overstated and Alabama's abilities are being understated. I think when you move those two together, it turns into a bit of a toss-up. Maybe Alabama's slight favorite, maybe even Clemson's slight favorite. But either way, this is just a complete toss-up, 50-50 game, more or less, and that's it. This isn't like Clemson is not walking into this game as the favorite like some people seem to think that they are. They are a very good team, and Alabama is a very good team, and this is going to be a very good game.
Yep. Score predictions?
Okay, so I am going to say 24-17 Alabama. I really think that Alabama's going to win this game. I really do believe that, and I'm going to go with 24-17.
I was waffling between that, and so I'll go with 21-14.
Okay, 21-14. I like that.
So I was going to do 2013. So
You think Clemson's gonna hit 2 field goals? No way.
Nah, dude, they're gonna miss the extra point.
Nah, there you go.
The guy Spence has missed 2 extra points this year. So
There you go. That's pretty good. Look, so is that where you're going with Mitch? 2013.
Yeah.
We are always right around the same predictions.
yeah.
There's been like a couple, like some of the games against like bad teams, like we just predicted different,
Yeah.
like different degrees of blowouts. But like in the closer games, we've always been like right around the exact same spot with these predictions. So yeah, this is what I think. I think Alabama wins by 3 to 7 points in this game. And I think that I talked about this in the little podcast that we did after the playoffs was announced. That Auburn loss is the best thing that could have happened to Alabama. I think that they're going to come out in this game.
I think they're going to play mad. I think they're going to play so mad.
Yeah, I think they're going to play great. I think we're going to see a super, super, super focused Alabama team. I think that they're going to play well. I think that Clemson's going to make plenty of plays in this game. I think it's going to be a really, really tough game. But I think Alabama will make 2 or 3 or 4 more plays, and that'll be the difference.
Agreed. All right, y'all. Well, we will probably see you next week. Hopefully it will be for a preview show of a national championship and not for a season wrap-up episode. But
Who do we hope we're previewing next week, by the way?
God,
Georgia.
I don't even know.
It's got to be Georgia, right?
Yeah, but Oklahoma's defense is so bad, though.
Yeah.
And Georgia's is so good.
Oklahoma's played a little bit better lately on defense, though, right? Like better than like they were playing earlier in the year. I just hate going up against a really great offense. Like give me a defense to try to make plays on instead of because I don't want to go into a game feeling like I hate going into a big game feeling Alabama needs to make a bunch of plays on offense to win. I think it's like a more comfortable feeling, right? Now maybe that shouldn't really be what we're making like decisions on, but it's just more comfortable for me to be facing a great defense than a great offense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't really know. I mean, I don't know who I want.
Yeah, well, it sort of goes back to what I was saying before about any of these 4 teams can win the championship. So there's not a clear answer as to who you would rather play.
And those 2 teams are also so different.
Right.
They're so different. Like Baker's really good. I just don't really want to see Baker.
That's fair. I completely understand and relate to that impulse.
Yeah. And I don't think Georgia can move the ball against Alabama.
That's fair. Okay, well, that's it for us. We'll see y'all next week. Hopefully, getting ready for a championship game, a 3rd straight, and roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.